This year, I moved a private member's motion calling on the government to increase Australia's international competitiveness for new energy industries, specifically by introducing production tax incentives. This motion was part of a long list of speeches and representations I've made, urging the government for a bold response to the United States Inflation Reduction Act. I've been worried that Australia is not acting fast enough or decisively enough to take advantage of the global transition to green energy. And so today I'm pleased to rise in support of the government's introduction of production tax incentives for hydrogen and critical minerals, which will support Australian industry in an increasingly competitive international market. I want to talk about why we need incentives like these, why production tax incentives are the way to go, and what it means for the future of hydrogen and critical minerals for Australia, and specifically WA. With decarbonisation, the global economy is shifting. After a transitional period, different countries will emerge as winners and losers, depending on their natural advantages and how nimbly they've responded to new opportunities. There's much discussion about Australia's natural advantages in a net-zero global economy, our abundance of sun, wind and critical minerals. For example, Australia is one of the few countries in the world with all the input minerals and materials required for lithium batteries. But we face a very real risk of remaining a country that digs and ships, rather than being a serious and competitive producer of new energy, unless we make sure downstream processing projects are established onshore. We also need to build a more resilient and diversified economy, one that will not only thrive in a decarbonised world, but will also withstand shocks and financial disruptions like we suffered through the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Right now, Australia has poor economic complexity. We rank 93 out of 133 countries, ranked between Uganda and Pakistan. Our economic complexity ranking has dropped 27 places since 2007. For comparison, some of the countries we normally see as our peers rank first for Japan and 8th for the UK and 14th for the US. According to Harvard's Atlas of Economic Complexity, Australia's low result is due to a lack of diversification of exports. If we want a strong, stable and prosperous economy, we need to diversify into decarbonised industries and production of more complex products that the world wants. The Inflation Reduction Act broke new ground with its $1 trillion Australian commitment to green and renewable energy. It was the most significant climate legislation in US history. Approximately 2/3 of this IRA budget is allocated to uncapped tax incentives for different stages of production within clean energy industries. These tax incentives deliver a deafeningly loud signal to investors that are considering doing new energy business in the US. Now, while we don't know exactly what the future is for the US Inflation Reduction Act post-Trump, it is clear that the race is on for countries to position themselves as leaders in the new energy economy. If President Trump does roll back some of the IRA incentives, it could actually be an opportunity that we need to catch up. Investors are looking for reasons to choose Australia over other countries. Companies are actively looking to develop and grow their renewables operations in Australia, but they need this government to give them tangible confirmation of Australia's energy transition vision and give them the confidence and certainty that Australia will welcome and incentivise the new energy opportunities currently knocking on our door. In the US, the manufacturing of batteries, solar panels and wind turbines, as well as the processing of critical minerals, attracts production tax incentives, as well as further bonus tax credits for components made in the US. The US package also has committed tax credits for any investments in zero-emissions electricity generation facilities or energy storage technology. The Smart Energy Council here in Australia has reported that due to the attractive US incentives, many of its member companies are moving their facilities to the US or proactively considering how to access IRA incentives. With Australian production costs already 10% higher than in the US, it's essential that the government provides a clear signal that Australia is ready and willing to invest in value-adding downstream projects. We have all the natural resources for this to make sense, but if other countries beat us to build the infrastructure, it will be too late. Production tax incentives are a proven mechanism that means you pay less tax when you actually produce something. The way production tax incentives usually work is to attach the credit to phases of manufacturing and production for a set period. Independent research from Mandala Partners found that the key driver for financial close for downstream projects is incentives that help mitigate total operating costs throughout production cycles, not loans and not upfront grants, but long-term embedded incentives that encourage advantages in production. Instead of money paid up front for something that may or may not become tangible, production tax incentives are payable only when you deliver, so taxpayers are paying for results. The hydrogen production tax incentive in this bill is intended to bring forward project development, make renewable hydrogen available sooner and build scale to reduce production costs over time. It will be delivered through Australia's tax system as a refundable tax offset, providing a $2 per kilogram incentive for renewable hydrogen to eligible producers for up to 10 years, finishing in 2040. The CSIRO recognises that green hydrogen is likely to play a significant role in a net zero global energy economy, with the potential to avoid approximately 1/3 of Australia's current fossil fuel emissions by 2050. Under the government's National Hydrogen Strategy, published earlier this year, green hydrogen manufactured in upcoming hydrogen hubs operating with reduced production costs will complement other renewable energy sources identified under the Climate Change Bill. But hydrogen still faces significant hurdles. Its current high production costs at $5 to $6 per kilogram must fall to about $2 a kilogram in order to become commercially viable. This should happen over time with technological innovation and renewables prices decreasing. For many hard-to-abate industries like steelmaking, shipping and aviation, hydrogen is the most promising prospect for decarbonisation, but it's not yet competitively priced. This production tax incentive for hydrogen is a step in the right direction. Ultimately, hydrogen will get there, but we need to make sure we are in the race by the time it does. Many other countries are competing to be leaders in hydrogen. Critical minerals such as lithium, nickel, cobalt, silicon and rare earth elements are essential components in many rapidly growing clean energy technologies. They're critical because they can't be easily or cost-effectively substituted. This bill targets critical minerals by introducing the CMPTI, with eligible entities able to claim up to 10% of their eligible expenditure for the processing and refining of critical minerals for a maximum 10-year period. This would be delivered in the form of a refundable offset similar to that proposed to hydrogen. Analysis by Mandala Partners estimates that the economic benefit of supported downstream processing of critical minerals could represent up to $2.4 billion in Australia's economy by 2035. Now, Western Australia, my home state, accounts for around half of global lithium production and is a major exporter of nickel, cobalt, manganese and rare earth elements. This government has already put nickel on the official critical minerals list and in February announced a 50% royalty discount for 18 months to address serious competition in that market, which was a positive step. It's essential that we accelerate opportunities in W's critical minerals sector and capitalise now on the position that critical and battery minerals will play in decarbonising the global economy. And the final component of this legislation affords Indigenous Business Australia greater powers to borrow and raise money by reducing barriers on investment partners, both Commonwealth and private. This modernisation of IBA's borrowing powers provides flexibility so that IBA can play a bigger role in supporting and promoting First Nations economic self-determination. The Joint Standing Committee on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs, of which I'm a member, recently concluded our inquiry into economic self-determination and opportunities for First Nations Australians. Recommendation 8 of that report, which was tabled yesterday, was that the Australian Government strengthen existing and develop new instruments to enhance and fast-track Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's access to finance and capital. And I commend the Government's responsiveness to the Joint Standing Committee regarding this matter as a first step. Before I conclude, I would like to make a comment about the Leader of the Opposition's stance on this bill. When the production tax incentives were announced in the budget, the Leader of the Opposition went running to the media declaring that the incentives were tax cuts for billionaires and vowing to repeal the bill if elected. This statement put him at odds with the WA Liberal Party. The WA Liberals are in favour of this bill because it's good for WA. I'm baffled as to how the Leader of the Opposition, who purports to be a champion of business and good economic management, would oppose an incentive that's designed to increase investment and innovation in Australia. Funding production tax incentives for critical minerals and hydrogen will be good for WA as we encourage investment and add value and green energy to our natural resources. And by extension, that's also good for Australia. In conclusion, I'm pleased to see a production tax incentives approach taken here. It means incentives are only paid once something's produced, it gives certainty to emerging industries, and it ensures that we can make the most of our natural resources and positions us as a long-term leader in a net zero economy. I commend the bill to the House.